Myles Green is my name. And that's really important for me to tell everyone, because I have a stutter. And as a stutterer, saying my name is one of the hardest things, because there's no way of avoiding it. Some people make up a nickname or abbreviate their name in some way, but I've never been into that. And for pretty much my whole life, I did everything I could to hide and ignore my stutter. Growing up, I never talked about it with my friends, my family, my girlfriend in high school, not once. It was always the elephant in the room under the table that no one spoke about, even though it was very obvious the elephant was there. Because every time I opened my mouth, you could see and hear my stutter. And even the times I didn't open my mouth, it was because of my stutter. So I go through school and I end up using all of these tricks and avoidances on the words and sounds that I have a hard time with to try to obscure this part of myself. I fail miserably. Fast forward in my life a little bit, I go to college. I end up majoring in Italian. And a few years later, I find myself teaching English in Palermo. And it's at about this point that I'm doing such a terrible, miserable job of hiding my stutter that when I block, when I have a freeze, it envelops my whole face and everything tightens. My jaw, my lips, my vocal cords, everything. And everything tightens so much that I end up grinding my teeth. And I grind my teeth so much and so hard, so frequently, that I end up wearing away some of my teeth's enamel to the point that I have pain and have trouble eating and drinking. And it was at about this point that I find out about the McGuire program, this 3-day-long course, this intensive program to help you conquer your stammer. I go online, I check out some of the videos, and I think, oh, this may be useful. So I fly to Scotland, and immediately there, I can't hide anything. Because all of the teachers, administrators, students, of course, they're all stutterers. So for the first time, I feel like I'm being seen. What makes this program so unique is the way they view stuttering. They view it like an iceberg, with the top part just being the physical manifestations of the stutter. The freezing, the struggle, the distortion of your mouth, your articulators, your lips, all that up here. But that's just what's on the surface. And what's underneath the surface, what you can't see, is much bigger and much more important. And that's the fear, the shame, the self-hate, the anxiety, and the frustration you feel as a stutterer, not being able to say your own name or speak like a child does. So to this end, on the second day of the course, they teach you this mentality, this approach to speaking called deliberate disfluency. And I've been using this here now. I've started and stopped the first sound of certain words and prolonged the first sound of other words. This helps me with my speech because I'm showing you the fact that I have a stutter rather than try to hide it. And on the third and final day of the course, they ask you to do what's called a disclosure. And they set up a stage in the middle of the city center. And they put a microphone on it and speakers around it. And a crowd gathers in front. And that's where for the first time, I got up in front of a group of people and I said, Myles Green is my name, and I have a stutter. And it was at that point that I felt the most naked, exposed, and alive I've ever felt. Thank you.
inspired my story was nuts. And I'm the youngest of 4, and my oldest sister, Mary, was always peculiar, and as kids we said she was nuts. In fact, one of us scrawled it on the back of a dresser I still have in black crayon, "Mary is nuts." But my mother managed to keep her on sort of the straight and narrow, and she finished high school and even 2 years of college. But then, unhappily for all of us, our mother died very suddenly. The summer that Mary was 21, I had just turned 9. And it affected all of us, I'm sure, but the person who was most immediately affected was Mary. And from that point on, without our mother to smooth her path and kind of keep her in line, she really spun out. And by the end of her 20s, she was hospitalized and diagnosed, and from that point on, she lived in sheltered housing. So a year ago, January, my sister Regina called to say that Mary had died. She was in her mid-70s. And my brother and my sister and I had to decide what to do. Well, I thought a funeral mass would be a good idea, maybe use the same church that my father had been buried from. But my brother took a very strong stand, and he said, "I'm not giving a penny to that church." In fact, his language was stronger than that. But now my sister also had an opinion, and she said, "We have to bury her next to Mother. Mother's the only one who really loved her." I'm easy, that's fine. So they have Mary cremated. Bill takes the ashes, and he says, "I've got Mary, she's no problem." My job is to call the cemetery. Now I know about the cemetery because I had visited there to see my mother's grave the year that I was the same age that she had been when she died, which was 45. So I knew there was lots of room in the spot. In fact, the lady in charge had said to me, "Does your family have any plans for this plot? It's quite valuable real estate." Real estate. I had never thought of it that way. I told her I would spread the word. So I call, and a very officious woman says, "Was there a funeral mass?" And I say, "No." "Well, then you'll have to get a letter from the priest." So I'm fairly sure that among the 3 of us, we don't know a priest. But we might know someone who might know a priest. So, also, it's Boston. It's a liberal town. There are Jesuits, Paulists. Someone will help me out. This is not insurmountable. So I go ahead with the plan. We conclude the call. About 10 minutes later, the phone rings, and it's the same officious woman. And she says, "In preparing the paperwork, I have discovered another problem. The maintenance fee for this plot has not been paid in some time. It now totals over $10,000. Now, all along, my brother has had a different plan. You might have guessed it. He said, "We drive to the cemetery, we dig the hole next to it, we put Mary in, it'll be fun." His plan becomes the #1 plan. We meet just north of the cemetery. We get into one car. We're feeling very furtive. My sister and I are very law-abiding. My brother, you might have guessed, less so. I'm prepared. I brought the shovel, 2 trowels, and a half a bag of potting soil so we can disguise the little box that the ashes come in case we are caught by the cemetery police. And I brought 3 azaleas. So, my brother knows how to find the plot. We get there, we start to unpack. Someone approaches us, and indeed, it's our 3rd cousin. We've never met him. Can we get rid of him, please? Quickly. He tells us things like, "Your grandfather was my father's favorite uncle." Who cares? We dig. We dig 3 holes. It's very difficult. We divide up the ashes. My brother-in-law says, "You've got to put in potting soil. These plants will never live." We put the potting soil in and we plant the azaleas, and then it's time to share a memory. Now, we've had several months to think of a nice thing to say, and none of us can think of one. Mary was very difficult. As I remind you, she surely was nuts. Anyway, my sister finally says, "I do have a memory. The summer that Mother died, when the house was so quiet, I came home one day, and someone was singing." She said, "I looked around the corner, and it was Mary. She was dancing. Her hair was wild, her clothes were misbuttoned. She was singing to herself, her eyes were closed. She looked happier than I had ever seen her." She said, "I only wish that she could have stayed in that happy place." And so that's where we hope she is. We did the best we could. We tucked her in next to Mother, and hopefully they're both resting in peace. And as for the azaleas, I have to tell you, I bought them at Trader Joe's. I don't think they live.
So I've been a stand-up comic for a decade now, and it has become the great passion and project of my entire life. In that time, I've had amazing life-affirming nights that give me the fuel to keep on doing it night after night. And I've had nights that I honestly just hope that I forget before I die. All right, all over the spectrum. But I want to tell you about the craziest night I ever had doing comedy. It doubles as like the worst night I ever had at a comedy club, the greatest professional achievement in my entire career, and the night that I came closest to death in my entire life. And that last part is due to the great burden of my life, is the fact that when I was 16, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which you don't know, it's a chronic digestive disorder. And day to day, it doesn't affect me that much, but I have a very bad case. My doctor, when he diagnosed it, straight up, dude, you have 10 out of 10 Crohn's disease, all right? Since I was 16, I've been in the hospital for a week or more on 4 separate occasions. I ended up having about 32 inches of my small intestine removed over time. And 1 week back in 2010, August 2010, it was really acting up on me. I was having a bad week. I'm not eating well. I'm very lethargic. I'm in a decent amount of pain. And that Friday rolls around, and I don't want to do anything. I just want to lay in bed and watch movies. But I'm booked that night at the Comedy Studio, a club in Cambridge which comics love doing. It's a fantastic club. The audiences are really great. And I'm thinking about canceling, but you know what? I don't want to be that guy who cancels. I want to go and have that fun. So I drag myself down. I'm like, all right, let's just do this. So I go down there and I get on stage and I end up having a great time. I have a great set. It's awesome. The crowd is amazing. There's a bachelorette party in there, which I don't know if you've ever been to a comedy show. Generally death, all right? But they were awesome. I was having fun with them. We were interacting. It was fantastic. I get off stage and I had that stage adrenaline, that rush. I'm like, you know what? I don't even feel that bad right now. I'm glad I came down. This is awesome. Great. And I'm sitting there for about 10 or 15 minutes watching the show. And after that time, I'm like, oh, I got to go pee. So I get up, go to the men's room, I'm standing up there doing my thing, and about 2 seconds in, I get hit with this wave of, oh no. And I have some perspective on that, all right? I stayed up late at night, like sleeping in a swivel chair because I couldn't, it was too painful to lay down. I vomited vegetables that I ate 5 days prior that came out pretty much intact because I could not digest them. When I was 16 years old and went into the ER for the first time standing at 5'7", I weighed 77 pounds, all right? I know a little bit about pain. This is on a different level. This is very, very, very bad. And the last thought I had was, everything is wrong. Like, that's the last thought I had, right? And then I wake up and I'm on the floor looking up and this dude with brown hair standing over me. He's like, dude, are you all right? He's from the audience. I recognize him. He's panicked. He's scared as I am. He helps me up. I'm like, he's like, are you all right? Do I need to call somebody? I'm like, no, I'm fine. Just give me a second. I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be fine. And like, to this day, 4.5 years later, like, I don't remember if he saw my dick when I was on the floor. I don't remember. Like, I wake up haunted. I don't know. If he did, he was cool about it. He didn't say anything, all right? So he gets me up and we're out in the hallway and it's a very small cramped, cramped space. Like back to the men's room door, there's a little cash register here, a narrow hallway, right across the way, women's room. And everybody's like getting me water, like, do we need to call 911? I'm like, no, I'm gonna be fine. Just give me a second. I'm totally chill. Give me a second. And that was a lie because 2 seconds later I passed out again. And this time I crashed through the women's room door, right? Yeah, so I'm in the women's room, like bottom of the women's room, legs out in the hallway, and this time I wake up to a girl standing over me, and all she's saying is, this is the women's room! Like, that's all she had to say. That's all she had to say. Like, and even then, like, I just fainted twice in public, I'm all discombobulated. In the back of my mind, I'm like, you're a bad person. Like, I had that thought, right? So they get me up, and I ended up walking out of there on my own power, and I go home, and I end up in ICU. 15 hours later, I'm in ICU, I'm getting a massive blood transfusion. What had happened is I was hemorrhaging, bleeding, massive internal bleed. And I ended up being in the hospital for 11 days. They took out 16 inches of small intestine at that point. And why I say that is the greatest professional achievement of my entire career is I have had the privilege to perform alongside some amazing Boston comedians in my life, some legends, fantastic. And I might not be the funniest comic in Boston. You might never hear me again after tonight, but I will say this, I am the only comic in Boston, for sure, who dropped a pretty awesome set with massive internal bleeding, all right? Yeah, I did that. That was me. Forget this night show, that's on my resume, all right? Yeah, you guys have been awesome. Thank you so much.